My wife got back in shape and decided she could do better than me, so she filed for divorce, but quickly regretted it. I'm Tom. I've been married to Sarah for almost 12 years now. I still remember the first time I saw her. It was at a coffee shop, and she was laughing. You know that kind of laugh that fills the whole room, like you couldn't help but smile just hearing it? Yeah, that was Sarah. Dark hair, bright eyes, and a smile that could make anyone feel like they mattered. I remember thinking, I'm definitely going to talk to her. And I did. That was the start of everything. Our relationship was fast, but it felt right. We clicked, you know? We got married after a couple of years, and everything seemed perfect. There were some bumps, of course. Every relationship has them. But we worked through it. Together. Then we had our son, and things changed. In a good way, of course. But everything shifts when a kid comes into the picture. Sarah, who had always been so active and fit, started struggling to find time for herself. Late nights with the baby, balancing work, everything was more exhausting than I think either of us expected. Sarah gained weight, and I could tell it bothered her. But I never saw her any differently. I loved her just the same. I told her all the time she was beautiful, that it didn't matter to me what she looked like. She was still the same amazing woman I'd fallen in love with. But over time, it started to feel like she wasn't so sure about that anymore. It wasn't huge at first, just small things. She'd mention how she didn't like the way her clothes fit, or how she missed being able to wear her old outfits. I reassured her, told her I thought she was perfect just the way she was, but she didn't. Seemed convinced. It started to get harder for her. The mood shifts, the frustration, the comments. The one thing I had hoped was that she knew I loved her unconditionally. But I wasn't sure she felt the same. It felt like I couldn't do enough to make her feel the way she once did. And that's when Sarah started making changes. One day, she came home and told me she had signed up for a gym membership. I need to get back in shape, she said. And you know, I was supportive. Of course I was. I figured, hey, it's great. She's doing something for herself. So I told her to go for it. I had no problem with it. If anything, I thought it would make her feel better, maybe help her find her confidence again. At first, it seemed like a good thing. She was waking up early, going to the gym, eating healthier. I even started eating better myself. It felt like we were getting back on track. But as time went on, something started to feel off. She was always busy, always at the gym or doing something else. At first, I didn't mind. I understood. She was working on herself. But after a while, it started to feel like she was pulling away from me. She'd cancel plans or skip out on family stuff because she needed to train or wanted to stick to her routine. And I couldn't help but notice that I wasn't part of those plans anymore. Now, I get it. People want to improve themselves. I had no issue with her wanting to be healthier, fitter. But something changed in her. It wasn't just her body. Her attitude started shifting. She started acting like she was better than me, and I didn't know how to handle it. It wasn't that she was arrogant or anything, but she started making these comments about how much she had found herself. She'd say things like, I feel so much more in control of my life now, or it's crazy how much my mindset has changed. I wanted to be happy for her. Really, I did. But I started to wonder, was I even a part of her life anymore? Or had I become someone who just didn't measure up? As Sarah got more into her fitness routine, it wasn't just the time she spent at the gym that changed things. It was the way she started looking at me. And honestly, I couldn't ignore it anymore. At first, I thought it was just me being paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking it. But no, there was something different in her eyes. I remember one evening, about 6 months into her new routine, we were sitting at the dinner table. She'd just come home from a workout, looking radiant as always, sweat glistening on her skin, a glow that made her look almost untouchable. She sat down across from me and, without warning, said, You know, I don't even recognize myself anymore. I'm in the best shape of my life. I feel stronger, more confident. Maybe I should be dating someone who's on the same level as me. I froze. I don't think I even blinked for a moment. My mind went blank, and all I could hear was the echo of her words, like a distant alarm I hadn't heard coming. What do you mean? I asked, even though I knew what she meant. She just shrugged, taking a bite of her salad like it was a casual conversation. I don't know. Maybe I should be with someone who actually gets what I'm doing. Someone who's into the same, more than looks or physical strength, the connection we shared, or so I thought. But Sarah wasn't the same. She'd spend hours getting ready, taking extra time to pick the perfect outfits, checking her reflection one too many times. She started going out more, meeting up with friends I didn't even know she had. Her social media was filled with gym selfies and motivational quotes, things that felt so foreign to me now. She'd come home late, too tired to talk, just to pass out in bed and wake up the next day even more driven. Meanwhile, I was still here, stuck in my old life, doing the same things. I'd try to talk to her, but she'd brush me off, saying she had to focus on herself right now. And sure, I understood the need for self-care, but there was a certain point where self-care started feeling a lot more like selfishness. The tension started to build between us. Our conversations felt forced, like we were trying to get back to a place that no longer existed. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger any of her growing frustration with me. And then one day, out of nowhere, she came home and told me she had signed up for a whole new fitness program, one with a personal trainer. I wasn't shocked. It seemed like every other week she was making another commitment to become the best version of herself. But this time, it was different. I could see the way she was looking at me when she said it. There was no excitement, no joy, just a cold, distant look in her eyes, as if I were just another obstacle to her goals. "I'm doing this for me, Tom," she said softly, like she was trying to explain something to a child. "I think it's time for me to start thinking about what I want. I've given so much of myself to you, to our son, to everyone. But now it's my turn." At that moment, I felt small, like I was just standing there, watching someone walk away from me. Someone who used to love me, but had decided they didn't need me anymore. By this point, it was becoming increasingly clear that Sarah was a different person. She was no longer the woman I had married, the woman I had loved. It wasn't just her physical transformation anymore. It was her attitude, her demeanor, the way she interacted with me. It felt like she was pulling away step by step, and I didn't know how to stop it. One evening, after a particularly quiet dinner, I tried to have a serious conversation with her. The kind of conversation we'd had before, when everything felt stable. I looked at her and said, "Sarah, I feel like we're drifting apart. We're not the same anymore. What's happening?" She sighed, looking at me with those eyes that once sparkled with affection but now just seemed distant. "I told you, Tom. I'm changing. I'm finding myself. You should be proud of me." "I'm proud of you," I said, though my voice wavered. "But it's like you don't even see me anymore. I don't know how to reach you. We're living in the same house, but we're strangers." She stood up, taking her plate to the sink. "Maybe that's because you're not keeping up with me," she muttered, her back to me as she rinsed the dishes. "I don't want to be held back anymore. I want more than what we have, and I'm not going to apologize for that." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. "Held back? You're saying I'm holding you back?" I couldn't believe it. I was trying to keep things together. I was trying to hold on to the life we built together, but it felt like she was the one pushing me away. "I don't mean it like that," she said, turning to face me. But there was no warmth in her voice, no comfort in her eyes. "I'm not happy anymore. You can't expect me to stay in a relationship just because it's what we've always known. I need something more. I need to find out who I am now." The weight of her words sank in, deeper than anything before. It was like a door I hadn't even known was there had just been slammed shut in my face, and I didn't know how to open it again. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah became more distant, more unreachable. Her nights out with friends grew longer, and her mornings spent at the gym seemed to stretch endlessly. I was living in a home that felt like a hotel. We shared space, but we weren't sharing our lives anymore. One night, I found her sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone with a smile on her face. It wasn't the usual smile, the warm, familiar one that made me feel like everything would be okay. No, this one was different. It was a smile I didn't recognize. "What's going on?" I asked cautiously, my heart racing. She glanced up at me, then back down at her phone. "I've met someone," she said softly, as if the words didn't mean anything. "His name is Jared. We've been talking for a while now." Jared. I didn't know who he was. But in that moment, I didn't need to know. I knew enough. The realization hit me like a wave. Sarah wasn't just changing. She was looking for someone else, so someone who fit the new version of her. And I wasn't that person anymore. I sat down at the table, stunned. "Are you serious?" The words barely escaped my mouth. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's been building up for months now. I feel something for him, Tom. Something I haven't felt for you in a long time." That was the moment I knew. It wasn't just that she was changing. It was that she was done with me. The woman I had married, the woman who had once told me I was her everything, was now telling me that she needed someone else. I didn't know what to say. My heart was shattering, and yet I felt oddly numb, as if I had already known this was coming, but had refused to accept it. The silence between us was deafening. I couldn't look at her, but I couldn't tear myself away either. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was just calm. It was as if this was all so natural to her now, a part of her new life. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "are you asking for a divorce?" She took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a flicker of hesitation, but only for a moment. Then she looked me dead in the eyes and nodded. "Yes, I think I am." The days that followed Sarah's confession were a blur. I couldn't even begin to process what had happened. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion, like I was stuck in a dream that I couldn't wake up from. I had tried to hold on, tried to salvage whatever was left of our relationship, but it was like trying to hold water in cupped hands. It slipped through my fingers no matter how tightly I grasped. She started making arrangements, almost immediately. It wasn't just the words she said, it was her actions. She started packing her things, sorting through the house, and talking about the future like she was already living in it. But every time she talked about her new life, it felt like a knife in my chest. The woman who once promised we'd grow old together was now moving on without me. One evening, after I'd finished a long day of work, I returned to an empty house. Sarah had gone out again, and this time it wasn't just for a few hours, it was for good. I walked through the rooms, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Everything was the same, and yet nothing was. I stopped in the living room, staring at the couch where we used to sit together, watching movies on lazy Sunday afternoons. We'd laugh, cuddle, and talk about our future. It seemed like such a distant memory now. The couch felt cold and empty, as though it too was mourning the loss of something that had once been. The silence was deafening. I had never realized how much I had relied on Sarah's presence until she was no longer there. The house felt lifeless, and I felt lost. I wandered aimlessly from room to room until I found myself standing in front of our bedroom door. I reached for the handle, but my hand hesitated. I pushed the door open, half expecting to find everything just as it had been when we first moved in together. But it wasn't. The room was hers now. The clothes on the floor weren't mine, they were hers. Her side of the bed was already empty, and her things were slowly being packed into boxes. As I stepped inside, the weight of the situation hit me all at once. The woman I had loved, the woman I had shared everything with, was leaving. She was gone, and there was nothing I could do to change it. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the wall in a haze of disbelief. I tried to keep my mind busy, tried to drown out the thoughts racing through my head, but it didn't work. No matter what I did, all I could think about was Sarah and how she had slipped away from me, how she had decided that I wasn't enough. The thought crushed me. How had I not seen this coming? How had I not realized that I was losing her piece by piece, until there was nothing left? As the days passed, Sarah and I barely spoke. She would come and go, leaving behind traces of her presence, but she never stayed long enough to talk. It was as if she had already checked out of our marriage, mentally and emotionally, and now she was just going through the motions. I tried to reach out to her a few times, tried to have a conversation about what was happening, but every time I brought it up, she would shut me down, saying the same thing. "I've made my decision, Tom. This is what's best for me." She didn't even seem sad anymore. She didn't seem conflicted. It was like she had moved on before. I even realized she was gone. One day, I was sitting at the kitchen table, lost in thought, when the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me told me it was important. I answered it, and my heart sank when I heard Sarah's voice on the other end. "I filed for divorce," she said, the words coming out like a final declaration. "It's done. I've already signed the papers. You should be getting them in the mail soon." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell, to demand answers, but another part of me, the part that was still holding on to the remnants of the life we'd once shared, just sat there in silence. "I'll be out in a few days to collect the rest of my things," she continued, her voice cold and distant. "I don't want to drag this out any longer. I'm done." The finality of it hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that she had already moved on, or the fact that she didn't even seem to care how much it was tearing me apart. It was over. There was no going back. Sarah was gone, and there was nothing left for me to hold on to. I hung up the phone, staring at the screen in a daze. The tears came then, slow at first, and then in an uncontrollable flood. It was like I was mourning the loss of the life I had once known, the person I had once loved. I cried for what felt like hours, for the love that had slipped through my fingers, for the future that would never be, for the empty house that no longer felt like home. But in the midst of the pain, a small part of me knew something else too. I was going to have to find a way to let go, because no matter how hard I tried to hold on to her, Sarah had already made her choice, and I couldn't make her stay. The weeks after Sarah left were the hardest of my life. I was drowning in a mix of emotions: grief, anger, confusion, and heartbreak. I went through the motions of work and daily life, but inside I felt hollow. Every corner of the house reminded me of her laughter, her presence, and the life we had built together. The divorce papers arrived a week later, sitting on my kitchen counter like a grim reminder of my new reality. I couldn't bring myself to sign them right away. It felt too final, too much like admitting that everything was truly over. So they sat there, day after day, a silent testament to what I had lost. But as time passed, something strange began to happen. The pain, while still sharp, started to dull just a little. I stopped waking up every morning with tears in my eyes. I started spending more time outside the house, at the gym, taking long walks, even joining a local hiking group. At first, it was just a way to escape the suffocating silence of the empty home. But over time, I realized I was slowly reclaiming pieces of myself. One night, as I was cleaning out the closet, I found an old box of memories, photos, letters, and little mementos Sarah and I had collected over the years. I sat on the floor, sifting through them, tears streaming down my face. But instead of feeling crushed, I found myself smiling through the tears. Those memories weren't just a reminder of what I had lost. They were a reminder of the love we had once shared. And for the first time, I started to feel like maybe, just maybe, I would be okay. Then out of nowhere, Sarah called me. It had been almost 2 months since we had last spoken, and hearing her voice felt like a shock to my system. She sounded different, hesitant, unsure. "Tom," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to say this, but I think I made a mistake." I froze. Was this some kind of cruel joke after everything she had put me through? She was now saying she might have been wrong. "I've been thinking a lot," she continued, "about us, about everything. I thought I was doing what was best for me, but I don't think I realized what I was giving up. You've always been there for me, Tom. You've always loved me, even when I didn't deserve it. And now, I'm starting to realize how much that meant." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. Part of me wanted to hang up the phone, to shut her out the way she had shut me out. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, despite everything, couldn't ignore the pain in her voice. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You left, you made your choice, and now you're telling me you're not sure." "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said quickly. "I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I had to tell you how I feel. I had to let you know that I'm sorry." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, waiting for me to say something. "Sarah," I finally said, my voice firm but calm. "I loved you more than anything, and I would have done anything to make you happy. But you made it clear that I wasn't enough for you. And as much as it hurts, I have to accept that." She started to cry, and for a moment, I almost caved. But then, I remembered all the nights I had spent alone, wondering what I had done wrong, all the pain I had carried while she moved on without a second thought. I don't hate you, Sarah, I continued. I'll always care about you, but I can't go back to the way things were. I deserve someone who sees my worth and doesn't need to lose me to realize it. She didn't say anything for a long time, and then, in a shaky voice, she whispered, I understand. I'm so sorry, Tom. When the call ended, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't closure, not entirely, but it was enough. Enough to let me start moving forward, signing the divorce. Papers felt different this time. It wasn't an act of defeat, it was an act of acceptance. By the time I sent them off, I felt lighter, like I had finally let go of the weight I had been carrying. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when the pain would resurface, but I was healing. Slowly but surely, I was becoming someone I could be proud of. One day, while hiking with my group, I met someone. Her name was Emily, and she had a warmth and kindness that immediately put me at ease. We started talking, and before I knew it, hours had passed. She wasn't Sarah, and I didn't want her to be. She was something entirely different. Someone who saw me for who I was and appreciated me for it. As I stood on that mountaintop, looking out at the endless horizon, I realized something. Life had a way of breaking you down, of forcing you to confront the things you thought you couldn't survive. But it also had a way of rebuilding you, of showing you that even in the darkest moments, there was still hope. Sarah had been a part of my story, a chapter that had shaped me in ways I couldn't fully understand. But she wasn't the end of it. She wasn't my whole story. I was ready to turn the page.